All right, what we got here? Courtesy of Scoop Upworthy. Attachment therapist shares three surprising clinical observations about Gen X parents. All right, a couple things I'm going to do here. First of all, what the fuck is an attachment therapist? So, first off, let's see what Bing says Gen X is, so we can nail that down. Gen X. Let's pull that up for you guys. Boom. Generation X, often shortened to Gen X, is a demographic cohort following the baby boomers and preceding millennials. Researchers in popular media use the mid to late 1960s as starting birth years and the late 1970s to early 1980s as ending birth years, with the generation generally being defined as people. Oh fuck. As people born from 1965 to 1984. By this definition, in U.S. Census data, there are 65.2 million Gen Xers in the United States as of 2019. Most members of Generation X are the children of the silent generation and boomers. Xers are often parents of the millennials and Generation Z. All right, so we figured that part out. So now let's figure out what the fuck an attachment therapist is, because I don't know and I don't want to ridicule what the fuck something I don't understand. An attachment therapist. Attachment therapy is based on attachment theory and explores how one's childhood experiences might impact their ability to form meaningful bonds as adults. Though attachment therapy is often recommended for those who had negative childhood experiences, anyone struggling to foster deep connections with others might benefit therapy. So, what is attachment theory? Attachment theory focuses on relationships and bonds between people, including those between a parent and child and between romantic partners. It is a psychological explanation for the emotional bonds and relationships between people. All right, I think that was useful to discover. So now that we know what all that shit is, because I sure in the fuck didn't. I was gonna say attachment therapy. Fuck is that? That's some more shit that the left is just making up nowadays, but seems to have some legitimacy behind it. So let's read, shall we? Attachment therapist shares three surprising clinical observations about Gen X parents. Parenting is a profound journey filled with joy, challenges, and self discovery. As generations evolve, so do parenting approaches and behaviors. In the ever changing landscape of parenthood, Generation X, often referred to as Gen X, occupies a unique space. Attachment therapist Steph, known as Steph Ann's STEPHANNE 221 on TikTok, recently shared three clinical observations about Gen X parents and their parenting styles in a video. These insights shed light on the complexities of parenting in the Gen X era and provide a valuable food for thought. Let's see if we can pull this video up. It's got a link here. Let's see if it'll take it straight to it. Cool, awesome. Oops, I made a boo boo. So what? It won't play unless I.
Okay, guys,
There we go. Here we go.
the time is here. But what about Gen X parents? I am going to share three clinical observations I have about Gen X and their parenting. Like and favorite.
Stop. Pause. What do we define as clinical observations here? Like clinical observations, like field tested study, like actual data and like experiments. I wonder what she defines as clinical, but like let's continue.
Favorite so that you can use this video when you are doing self reflections later on. All right, first clinical observation. For whatever reason, Gen X parents do not seem to seek out family therapy. Just like point blank, I work with a lot more boomer parents in the family therapy context than I do Gen X. I don't know why that is. I'd be super interested to hear what you guys think. And I want you to know that I am super motivated and interested in working with Gen X parents, especially
Oh, sorry. Go
actually
ahead,
seeing
finish.
how hard you are working in my comment sections. That has been like really enjoyable to read. Second clinical
Okay, before we get to the second clinical observation, to answer that question, why don't Gen X parents like go to therapy and whatnot? Because if I had to take a guess, is because like they didn't have. First of all, the human condition wasn't so medicalized back in that time, and it was still figuring a lot of shit out. Like the things that we know now Like if you're looking at you talking about people who were born in the late '60s to the early '60s to the late '70s. So these people are in their 50s, pushing 60s. Like they're setting their ways. Like these things, all these, all the importance of therapy and all this shit. They these are the people that were like alcoholics and all that type of shit, and they got through it somehow. Like some of them did it healthily. A lot of them, I presume, did it unhealthily. But they are from an era where you just pull yourself up by the bootstraps and you fucking figure that shit out, man. Like all that talking and wondering and shit. They just did it. So it's not it's not far fetched for them to be like, why do I even need therapy? Like in my upcoming, like my parents beat whoop my ass, other parents whoop my ass, teachers whoop my ass. Like I was trying not to get my ass whooped, and that shit got me through life. So why the fuck do I need a therapist? Now, should they address some of that repressed shit if they had a very traumatic upbringing? Certainly. But if you're trying to get somebody in their 50s and 60s to address trauma, it's almost impossible. I would suggest if they don't have any framework that precludes the necessity for that, or that makes that something that's necessary. Like if there's no if if therapy was not something that happened in a family, or it was not something that they experienced in their life that they found useful, then at this point, whatever they found useful in place of that is now the status quo, and it's like you can't teach an old dog new tricks. That's where that adage comes into play. So let's see what else. What's our second clinical observation?
Observation, and I think this is probably going to be the hardest one to receive. So take a deep breath. Gen X parents seem to sometimes make themselves emotionally indistinguishable from boomers. And thanks to you guys, though, I have now paid closer attention to the Gen X parents that I'm working.
I don't like when they just throw words up on the screen, like when I'm trying to listen. Like now I gotta listen to you talk and also read. Like I recognize these folks have greater psychological flexibility, but I thought they were more open-minded boomers. You guys help me connect the dots. We are Gen X parents. Like more open-minded boomers. Like okay, so I just need to read that because I can't. I don't really want to have to decide whether I'm going to listen to you talk or read what's on the screen. I don't think that's a fair deal you give me.
Thanks to you guys, though, I have now paid closer attention to the Gen X parents that I'm working with, and I can see that there is a difference between Gen X parents and boomers. I can see that Gen X parents are really pushing themselves to receive more from their children and to be more emotionally vulnerable to their children. And the way that I see it is through an individual therapy lens, meaning like I process things with their children and then I say like, hey, you need to bring this to your parent, and this is, going to enhance vulnerability and your connection to your parent, which you want, right? And so that's like their homework, and they take it to their parents. And how their kids come back to me is how I hear their parents are processing it. And I can hear that they're really trying, like, and that it's really, really hard. At the same time, I can still hear that wall in terms of vulnerability. Like they're allowing that open heartedness go up into a point. My hunch is that wall that I'm coming up against is coming from that Gen X's parents' own attachment history and their own attachment pain with their parent. So I do recommend that, if any Gen X parents are looking, listening to this TikTok and looking to grow, that you begin to reflect on your own relationship and potential unmet needs with your own parents, so that you can do that inner healing to be more emotionally accessible and have that caregiving accessibility for your children. I do want to give you guys some well-earned praise, though, and that leads me to the third clinical.
Okay, so clinical observation number two, if that's what we're calling this. Um, what was I gonna say? Okay, so if we're talking about people born in the early '60s to late '70s, like, so you're talking about their kids as in adults? Like, let's run that back. Like, let's get the audio on that.
Observation are really pushing themselves to receive more from their children and to be more emotionally vulnerable to their children. Are really pushing themselves to receive more from their children and to be more emotionally vulnerable to their children.
Okay, so to be more emotionally vulnerable to their children. And on the screen it says receive more equals being open to hear more of their children's emotional needs and vulnerability without immediately shutting them down. So if these are Gen X people, like these people's children should be adults. Even if they wait till they're 40, their children like are pushing 20 now. So what are she talking about? Gen X parents that are like the parents of like small children or adolescents? You mean tell me all these people are like 50, 60-year old like new moms and dads like or I'm curious about that part. Like how old are we talking about Gen X here? How old? Like what and when it comes to emotional needs and vulnerability, like even with my mom, like my mom's in her 60s and I don't even like the time for emotional needs and vulnerability has long since gone. Like I would like to have a relationship with my mom, but I don't like you can't mom me now. It's too late for that. I'm a grown ass man. I'm a 30-year-old man. How the fuck you gonna mom me? Like you supposed to mom me when I was a boy. I'm a man now. It's too late for the mom role. So it's got me wondering like what the fuck kind of parent child dynamic age wise is she talking about that where this has some credence? Like it just is heavily puzzling.
Accessible and have that caregiving accessibility for your children. I do want to give you guys some well earned praise though, and that leads me to the third clinical observation is that y'all are crushing it in the couples therapy arena. By far and large, most folks in my practice and in my colleagues' practices who enter couples therapy are Gen Xers. Gen X, out of all the generations who I've done couples therapy with, which has been from Gen Z to Boomer, Gen X seems the most committed to the couples therapy process. I am genuinely proud of you guys for that. Like, I see you showing up and doing the hard work in the couples therapy arena, which gives me confidence you can do the same hard work in the family therapy arena. I hope my content can be supportive of you working on your own attachment healing and attachment injuries. And I'd love to hear from you in the comment section about what you thought about this feedback. I will see if I make like a whole video about your own feedback. But
All right, that's enough for you. Okay, so that wasn't really, you know, I I don't I don't think videos like this are like she's not harmful, but I don't see how it's helpful, and it doesn't really make sense to me. Like to show up in the couples therapy arena, yeah, well, because they're probably getting older and realizing that bouncing back from relationships isn't something you're gonna be able to do in modern times as a 50, 60-year-old person. Like it's not like life is a lot like you on the back nine at that point and trying to make lasting relationships as a borderline senior citizen is too late. Like you need to have those things established and in place by then. So whilst I guess some of the shit she said is obvious, I think it's rather incoherent. I don't think they're striking observations like the text here suggests. I work with a lot more boomer parents in the family therapy than I do Gen X. I don't know why this is. Like I think I mean I understand that this is condensed for the sake of conversation, but I don't think identity type labeling and all of that shit in the therapy realm is useful. Like like it's even when just reporting what your findings. Like this needs to be like a case by case type thing. And yeah, all these cases might have some relevant details, but I think they all different as well in terms of like how people work through their issues. And I'm just really skeptical about this whole thing with they working with their children and shit. Like it just like what the clinical observation based on what? Like I feel like if you're gonna be tossing the word clinical observation around, you need to have some data. Like I'm scrolling through this shit, like all the only data I see here is fucking TikTok videos, man. That realm and people commenting like this is not clinical. What's clinical about social media? What's clinical about TikTok? Like I did in headlines like this three surprising clinical observations about Gen X parents. Like nothing she said was really surprising, profound, like unknown. Like it's like okay, so you saw some shit that we all could have kind of put together if we just sat around and thought about it long enough. I don't know, man. It's just shit like this where I say all these authorities popping up on TikTok. Anybody with a fucking cell phone is suddenly a scholar in regards to just life in general. How the fuck does that work? I really, really would like to know.